Good morning, everybody. I am Representative Cedric Frazer, District 43A, which covers the cities of New Hope and Crystal. Today I'm here with some of my colleagues that are part of the Inclusive Democracy Caucus, myself as a co-chair, Representative Emma Greenman, and Senator Liz Bolden, who is not here. They're on the floor right now. Here in Minnesota, we cherish our values of freedom, equality, and equity. We understand that to overcome our greatest challenges, we must unite across boundaries of region, race, and generation. Our journey towards building a democracy that truly serves the people of Minnesota is bold and unyielding. First, we recognize the importance of fair representation for all, including those who are incarcerated. That's why we are advocating for the banning of prison gerrymandering by ensuring that incarcerated individuals are accurately accounted for based on their last known address in the community where they lived prior to incarceration. We are upholding the principles of democracy and fairness by doing that. Second, we are committed to expanding access to the ballot box, especially for our younger generations. Our youth represent the future of our state, and their voices must be included in shaping it. By expanding college voting access, we are empowering young Minnesotans to actively participate in our democracy from an early age. Their perspectives, ideas, and concerns are vital to driving positive change for our communities. Furthermore, we stand firm in our commitment to protecting the rights of voters of color. The Minnesota Voting Rights Act serves as a crucial safeguard against discrimination and disenfranchisement. Every Minnesotan, regardless of their background, deserves equal access to participate in our democratic process. By bolstering our Minnesota Voting Rights Act, we are defending the fundamental rights of all Minnesotans and promoting a more inclusive democracy. In conclusion, let us all continue to work together towards a Minnesota where every voice is heard, every vote counts, and every Minnesotan has the opportunity to shape their own future. By championing initiatives such as banning prison gerrymandering, expanding college voting access, and strengthening our Minnesota Voting Rights Act, we are not only strengthening our democracy, but we are honoring the values that define us as Minnesotans. I will now turn it over to my colleague, good friend, Representative Mike Fryberg.
Thank you, Representative Frazer. So I'm Representative Mike Fryberg. I represent District 43B, the other half of the Senate district that Representative Frazer and I share. So thank you for your remarks. Thank you also to my colleague, Chair Carlson of the Senate Elections Committee. I'm the chair of the House Elections Committee, but the Senate is on the floor right now, so they are unable to be here, but I know he wishes he could be here as well. Today on the floor, we're going to be considering the Elections Policy Bill, House File 4772. The bill corrects historical wrongs and federal mistakes. It improves the clarity of how our elections are influenced, and it expands voter access for eligible students. These are all provisions that we heard throughout this year in the Elections Committee, many of them authored by my colleagues, many of whom are here. So it includes Representative Greenman's Voting Rights Act, which Representative Frazer talked about. It's an extremely important piece of legislation that's necessary because of a misguided federal court decision. It includes Representative Agbaje's prison gerrymandering legislation, Representative Purcell's bill that will improve voter turnout on college campuses, Chair Stevenson's bill to strengthen protections against deepfake crimes, and includes important pieces of legislation from other colleagues as well. So I'm really excited that we're going to have a robust debate on the House floor tonight. Look forward to it. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Chair Fryberg. My name is Christy Purcell. I'm a representative from 58A. I represent the communities Northfield, Lonsdale, Dundas, and New Prague. And I am the chief author of the provision in the omnibus bill to expand access for college voting on campus. So there are 2 college campuses in my district in the town of Northfield, one of which has a election day polling place on campus and one which does not. And we can absolutely see in real time in my small district the differences in voter engagement. So the bill that I have opens the opportunity for colleges to have 1 day early polling on campus because we know the barriers for students to vote. It's likely their first election. They almost certainly don't have transportation or they're trying to squeeze in voting between classes, extracurriculars, work. So I am thrilled that we have a student here to talk about his own experience in this realm, and so I'm going to turn it over to Tyro Devits.
Hello, my name is Tyro Devits, and I'm a student at Normandale Community College. Minnesota students have led the nation in student voter turnout over the past 3 elections. While this is to be celebrated, there are still disparities. These disparities stem from unequal access to the polls. Research conducted by the Center for Information and Research on Civic Learning and Engagement reveals that young non-voters often cite transportation challenges and inconvenient polling locations as one of the most significant barriers to voting. Opening on-campus polling places has proven effective in addressing these barriers and disparities. When St. Paul College opened up an on-campus polling location in 2018, they saw a 5% increase in student voting that year. That is why Lead Men, the student organization which I represent, has partnered with MTV Plus One, the polls to increase the number of polling locations on college campuses in Minnesota. However, our efforts to open on-campus polling places have been hindered by bureaucratic processes. Such lengthy approval processes and complex logistical requirements is why we are excited about the new proposed legislation, which will streamline these processes and make it easier for colleges and universities to open more campus polling locations during the early voting period. As I entered college, I became more civically engaged on my campus. I learned how important it was for college students to make informed voting decisions. Yet I've seen many students struggle or cannot get to polling locations as they balance work, school, family responsibilities. Many students may not have a license, a vehicle, or any other means of transportation to get to their polling locations. This legislation is a perfect opportunity to address one of the major hurdles for voting for our students. It would allow Minnesota to continue its streak of being one of the best in the nation at youth voter turnout and cultivating a new generation of active, empowered citizens like myself. Thank you, and I will turn it over to Representative Abaje.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. My name is Esther Agnew. I represent House District 59B, which covers parts of downtown, Northside, and St. Anthony, Maine areas in Minneapolis. So I am the chief author of the prison gerrymandering reform provision, and also would like to thank my colleague in the Senate, Senator Mitchell, for a lot of her help working on this bill as well. Prison gerrymandering is an unfortunate flaw in the census collection system that over time has led to imbalances in the population count. While the Census Bureau has not yet decided to act on this, states can. And this bill lays out that for the 2030 census and beyond, Minnesota will reallocate incarcerated persons in state and federal prisons to the census blocks where they came from, rather than to the jurisdiction of the prison. The proposition of this bill is to restore fairness to our system. For too long, communities, whether represented by Republicans or Democrats, are taking advantage of the prison population in their districts to increase their numbers when it comes to census allocations. That should stop. And now Minnesota has an opportunity to stand with other states that are ensuring that people are counted in their communities where they come from. This is an opportunity that we afford to our college students, our military members, and others who reside in one place but are doing some type of time or service elsewhere. Incarcerated persons have connections to the communities where they come from, and that should be no different at census time. And with that, I'll hand it over to Khed Omar to talk more about this and other provisions in the bill.
Hello, my name is Khed Omar, and I live in Bloomington, Minnesota. I'm a leader, husband, and an organizer. I've been organizing in the Muslim community for many years, educating people about their voting rights and translating for voters at the polling location. Unfortunately, despite having the right to an interpreter at the polls, I saw elders who pushed every inch to come out and vote, but were confronted with an experience that could scar them from ever possibly voting again. They received no support with their language barrier. They asked multiple times for support, and no one was able to help them. They felt humiliated and unsupported, and when they came into the polling location, I heard frustrations in Somali saying, I knew it, we should not have struggled to come out because this voting process is only for certain groups. And when I offered to translate for them, they already decided to go home and not vote. So unfortunately, as much as I would like this to be a one-off experience, we hear stories like this every single election year. While we should celebrate being a state with some of the highest voter turnout in the nation, there's also a stark racial disparities in who actually registers and turns out to vote. While there are many factors that contribute to this likelihood, it is our responsibility to ensure that discriminatory voting practices and policies are not one of those reasons why people don't vote. So that's why Minnesota needs its own Voting Right Act, so we can protect people in my community and also in the larger Minnesota community from intentionally or unintentionally voter suppression. Thank you, and now I pass it to Representative Greenman.
Good morning, almost noon. My name is Representative Emma Greenman, and I represent 63B in the House and am proud to be a co-chair of the Inclusive Democracy Caucus with Representative Frazer and Senator Bolden, as well as Vice Chair of Elections in the House. And what I'm really excited about in listening to our agenda today on the floor, it really builds on last session, which we took really great strides to strengthen the freedom to vote and to expand inclusive, multiracial, multi-generational participation in Minnesota. Our democracy works, and I think we all agree, when everybody has a voice in the decision-making. And as you can tell from the policies that my colleagues talked about, that work continues. We are also compelled at this time, and because of the times we live in, to focus on defending our democratic institutions and protecting Minnesota voters. We started that work last year with protections against voter intimidation, against harassment and intimidation of election workers, and now this year we continue that work of protecting voting rights in Minnesota with the Voting Rights Act. And I'm proud to be the co-author, along with my Senate partner, President Bobby Joe Champion, who again is probably presiding over the floor and can't be here today. This bill codifies and it strengthens the Federal Voting Rights Act protections against racial discrimination and puts them into Minnesota law. Enshrining these protections has always been important, but it's now urgent under the Eighth Circuit decision that upended decades of precedent to hold that voters themselves can no longer challenge racially discriminatory laws or restricting plans under the federal VRA in the Eighth Circuit. What that means is that us, along with 6 other states, Minnesota voters no longer can go to court on their own and under the Minnesota Voting Rights, or under, the Federal Voting Rights Act. It leaves those voters without a private right of action. It's just one in the long line of decisions that we've seen recently in the federal courts that have weakened the protections intended in the Federal Voting Rights Act and make it even more imperative that the state acts. What this bill does, what the Voting Rights Act does, that's traveling, that'll be on the floor today, is it codifies, it streamlines, and it strengthens protections into Minnesota law with causes of action around voter suppression and against vote dilution in redistricting and at-large elections. I should note this will be the first time we put into Minnesota law prohibitions against discriminating based on race in voting, and it's really critical that we do. It also ensures that there's a private right of action, as I mentioned, and it provides the opportunity, and this is new with state voting rights acts, to actually work together to fix the problem or procedure without going to court to get the remedy and the result. In the era of that we have seen in the federal courts and their increasing hostility to voting rights protections, we think it's imperative to our job here in Minnesota to ensure that in Minnesota, voters have those protections, voters of color have the protections historically provided by the federal law. Ultimately, our goal with all of these provisions is ensuring equal access, ensuring robust participation, ensuring that Minnesota's democracy includes everybody in our community, of every race, of every zip code, of every generation. And so with that, I think I can open up for questions.
Bajay, a question. How does that work? Would you get a roster of prison people who are in an institution on census day, maybe whatever day you pick, and then somewhere along the line before the state does its redistricting, there'd be just a statistical process of reallocating those? Is that?
Yeah, so the way that the provision is set up in the bill is that both the Department of Corrections would work with the Legislative Coordinating Commission on collecting that data. So right now, with us starting 6 years before the 2030 census, we have 6 years to collect that data, make sure the data that we have is accurate. And so then that way, when it does come to census time, states, normally would they just send everything up and just do a statewide count? But states will now have the opportunity to reallocate people based on the addresses that they've collected. So that way, those districts will know what their counts are as well.
Again, probably on census day? Is that how
Yeah,
it
it's
would
on
be?
census day. It's usually a couple of months before that, or a couple of months after that states have to start putting all their data together to send to the federal government.
To people say in Moose Lake about that, where maybe half their population is incarcerated.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's happened in other states. I think New York is an interesting example where a number of the population in upstate New York was the prison population there, and many of those people came from the more urban centers across the state of New York. And so those numbers would have to be reallocated, and then when it came time to their next redistricting, it showed a more fair balance of actually where people were from. But in Minnesota, we have prisons in both areas like Moose Lake, but also areas like Stillwater, so it will affect people across the state.
Would this also include the state hospitals that are administered by the Department of Human Services rather than Department of Corrections?
Well, right now we have those that are under the Department of Corrections, and we'll double check to make sure that either they're included or they're not already counted in a separate way.
Is there any estimates as to how many votes are displaced right now? I mean, is it fair to assume that it's the entirety of the incarcerated population?
Yes, the entirety of the incarcerated population is currently not being allocated to where they came from. And that's particularly important because when people are released, at least according to 2021 data from the Department of Corrections, at least 95% of incarcerated persons go back to their communities.
Does this bill also include the private right to sue or private right of action, or is that a different bill?
The private right of action is in the federal voting rights, or excuse me, in the codification of the Voting Rights Act, and so the Minnesota Voting Rights Act.
That's not this.
That is not the prison gerrymandering.
No, I mean, this entire package that's going through tonight. Is
So
it?
both, so let me read. So today on the floor, we will have, and if you have more specific questions, I'm going to turn over to our chair, the Elections Omnibus Policy Bill, which includes both the end of prison gerrymandering and the Minnesota Voting Rights Act, which has the private right of action, as well as the college voting on-campus provision, and then also a bunch of other really great things. There's some campaign finance provisions in there too. So all of that will be on the floor today that we're voting on. They're just different provisions.
Speaking of those other provisions, just briefly off topic, but kind of still on the topic of this bill, Representative Fryberg, could you talk a little bit about the deepfake portion of this bill and why that was an important thing to include as kind of AI technology becomes more prevalent?
Well, you sort of answered the question there. I mean, we passed a provision last year relating to it, and this just strengthens it. I know it's an issue that Chair Stevenson's been working on a lot. And it's, honestly, it's not just in the elections context where this is important, but obviously it's very important there because it does have the potential to influence our elections. So we want the law to be as strong as possible, just to make sure that, false information won't influence our elections.
Can I ask our college student a question, please? I'm going to ask you for a statistic that I know you don't have, so I'm going to ask instead for what your sense is when you're talking to students. How many students do you think want to vote where the school is, and how many want to continue to vote where their hometown is? Do you have a sense as to how that breaks down?
I don't have a specific sense, but I know that many of my friends don't know where their polling locations are in their own hometown, but they do attend community college. So that information would be a lot more easy to access for them, and being able to attend their community college to vote would be far easier than, and make it more accessible to them since they'd be first-time voters.
Do you know if anyone at even your school has any way to help students get a mail ballot, for instance, from home, if that's their preference? Is there any way to facilitate that? You look like you have something to say, Representative Greenman.
No, I mean,
You have that look.
well, I was just gonna say, I think that part of the issue is that it really depends on what campus you're on. I'm looking at Representative Purcell, and part of what we're trying to do is ensure that every campus, it doesn't matter what the town-gown relationship's like, it doesn't matter, it doesn't put the onus onto the student organizing or the faculty support, that the goal of this provision is to say that everyone should be able to have that ability. And so I think, my guess is that I'm just totally, sort of knowing what I know about different campuses, is there's probably some places where folks are really doing a lot of that work. But I do know, having done campus organizing a long time ago, I'll date myself, that having a place on campus where folks can go creates both the sort of the vibe and the culture of voting that will increase turnout. I mean, the sort of the we saw it at the super block, and I think all the way down to campuses. And so I think it's great that folks can vote by mail, they can vote early in person, they can vote on election day, but we want to make sure that our students on campus have all those same options that other folks do. Any additional questions? Great, well, thank you. We'll be on the floor today at 3:30, and we look forward to continuing to talk to all of you about it. Thank you.